And we've got caught up in this, in a wash of niceness. And it really is actually cruelty, really.
It is. Or, oh, I can't say anything. I think, things can be said in a very respectful way but it has to happen sort of real time, like as. Hey, Lauren, how are you?
Hi, Lynette. Great to see you again. And I'm excited to go into another Culture Cast conversation. I love these conversations, and I hope our audience is enjoying as much as we are. So we're going to set this one up, right? We're going to talk about, values sort of today and what happens around, what's going on around consistency of values in organizations. So
exactly. So we're headed into a situation here where a lot of organizations are focusing on their culture. We're seeing them either A, introduce a new set of values, or B, refreshing a set of values that they already have. And I know that a lot of times, when I'm running my culture sprint workshops, I'm hearing from the group, what happens when one of our peers or a leader in that case as well isn't living one or all of the values? What do you do? And I thought that's a really great challenge statement. So how might we help teams and people who feel that somebody within their peer group isn't living the value? So for me, the impact here is that it impacts everybody. It impacts the way that a peer group might work. When a team of employees are seeing a leader not living a value, I think that impacts it even more. I think we're going to see, I think it really has a big impact on the confidence and just sort of the enthusiasm within the organization. What do you think?
Yeah, I do. And I think the one thing is important to recognize is that you're going to see values being contravened all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this idea of organizations living perfect values, we know is not true. Yeah, and I think sometimes there's sort of unreasonable expectations because they're said, because they're posted, because we storytell to them, because we have the best enthusiasm around it that somehow we're going to hold people up in a goldfish bowl of perfection. And we know that so it's what we do about it that I think we're talking about, because it's so important. And I think what brings integrity to those values, Lynette, is that when we confront, in a constructive way, when we see them contravene. Because I think when they become eroded is when people start to declare them, state their best intention about it, and then ignore when they know, and we all see that they're contravene. One of the stated values of the last organization that I was part of was to be fiercely and personally accountable. And people think that they are. And, and most of the times people would declare that about themselves, but often caught up in the context of something, we lose our way. And I was in this one meeting, and this happened, fairly regularly, but in this one meeting where there's a very senior vice president that was talking about, in this case, it was about his struggle meeting deadlines around contribution around some major technology commitments. And he didn't even know he was doing it, but he was catching you. If you sit back and listen to him, it was everybody else's fault. He was blaming everybody. And he just kind of rose up to this kind of very, elegantly stated victim kind of thing. And I think it was important to have a conversation with him and say, did you notice what you said? Did you hear yourself saying that? And I think when we just sort of allow that to happen at a meeting like that, without any constructive kind of challenge, either from his boss or from peers, then I think we're showing disrespect towards the value, not towards the person, but towards the value. Because I know darn well in confronting this person that he didn't even realize that he was doing that. It was like a defensive kind of, felt he was in a corner. And when he kind of realized it, he was going, gosh, that wasn't helpful to anybody. It didn't, So I think it's very important and the other thing you said that I think was really instructive, we're not talking about this just happening with frontline people.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about every fabric of the company. And so the company needs to be good at living its values. It also needs to be exceptional at recognizing when it's out of line with its values, and then having a conversation, a constructive conversation about it and correcting it.
Yeah, and for me, I think, like, wouldn't it be cool if we could take that, what you just said there, and learn to embrace those situations and, sort of making them powerful experiences for learning and growth. I mean, I'm a feedback junkie. I love getting feedback, and I have big shoulders. I would rather you tell me exactly what was sort of happening in that situation and then sugarcoat anything. But I think that, also, I guess differences in understanding are also super important as well. So I don't think we want to sort of temper how people show up at work or sort of their view. In this case, this person, this VP that was sort of blaming everybody else, that person didn't feel like they were doing that. But if we always looked at that situation in that sort of light, you would never give that person an opportunity to really show up with their true self and have that contribution that, that
No,
they're
you're right.
trying to, right? So you're trying to draw out of them a little bit more. So for me, I would probably say, if you've got a situation like that, rather than sort of jumping to the conclusion like, oh, this person is sort of not taking self-accountability or accountability for the situation, is, start to immediately probe, real-time feedback, probe into, well, tell me more about that. Can you say more about that? What do you mean by that? And then sort of repeat back to them what you heard, because maybe it's just a matter of, differences in how that person projects their opinions or their thoughts.
Or how they're processing it. And I completely agree with you. And I think that it's, out of those meetings, it's not atypical, regardless in the organization where the conversation goes is between two people going, hey, did you hear so-and-so use all those excuses around blah, 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 blah. And this sort of gossip trail happens out to the parking lot or, at the Starbucks line, and it doesn't do anybody any good.
That water cooler, oh my, that is exactly what happens. If you don't have the guts to say stuff, if you don't have that sort of safe environment already set with your team to be able to sort of challenge back, or just not even challenging back, just asking for clarity and to clarify that situation, you're right, they leave there and then the water cooler starts and then nothing ever changes. That, to me, the water cooler, the people that are talking at the water cooler are doing a worse job than that person that's, maybe the perception is that they're not living that particular life.
We almost do anything to tell little white lies and tell the unpleasant truths. And, it's a human nature. I mean, we don't want to hurt people. The flip side of it, though, is that when you really care for someone, you tell them and if your intention's right, you don't have to worry about the words being perfect. People get it.
Yeah.
People get it if you care for them. When the words become difficult is when they're mean-spirited, and then people get highly protective, naturally so, because they feel like the intention is not to be helpful. The intention of the other person is to harm them. And we've got caught up in this in a wash of niceness. And it really is actually cruelty, really.
It is. Or, oh, I can't say anything. I think, things can be said in a very respectful way but it has to happen sort of real time, like as soon as that's all happening. And if you, as a strong leader, are hearing that kind of stuff, or even just a leader, like at any level of the organization, if you're hearing a peer and you're not liking how that peer is interacting, I think the best thing you can do is try to help that peer right through everything right away. So that, you don't get that water cooler stuff happening,
Yeah. And, I think sometimes we put a halo around some people too, like, the great salesperson, and we see them doing something that is a big value contradiction, and we go, well, we can't talk to that person because they're a superstar in terms of results. And I think that disconnect is harmful. It's harmful to that individual. It's harmful to the institution. We start making up excuses or levels. We can't say anything to her or because she's a VP or a director. And then pretty soon we stop. We get spongy and squishy, and and I think we lose tremendous momentum in advancing our character as an institution. So I think this is really important, Lynette, and I'm really glad that you raised this. You raised this topic, and I think we need to be more practiced all the time. And maybe we can lend our audience some thoughts around, what are some how might we things that they, or some things that they might do. And I think one of the things is to practice. If you're observing it, is to have the courage to constructively, thoughtfully, in a caring way, constructive. I mean, I'm not talking about that you have to be, the value police, because you don't need to do it. There's going to be lots of opportunity, right? I guarantee you, it's going to be in front of you. But have the courage to care for people, to say something about it. And I think on the reciprocal side is when someone confronts you on that, don't punish them by being so defensive that it makes it painful that they never do it again.
Yeah, I've always been taught when people give you feedback, the response is thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. That's it. This thank you. It's not, but or making an excuse for it. It's thank you. And I will take that into consideration. And I think to build on what you're saying there too, I think that, have the courage to, react to that person right away. But also to, I totally lost my thought.
You know what? That's okay, because I'm with you, and I know, because timeliness is really important. Like, a lot of times I feel I'm disappointed. I love to get the feedback, but I'm disappointed sometimes when it's miles away from the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like all this time has traveled, and I'm going, well, shucks, I didn't even realize. And oftentimes I don't realize I'm doing something. I'm not trying to make an excuse for it. It's just that I get caught up in a moment. Stuff comes rolling out of my mouth or my hands or whatever, and away. And so, gosh, when you have someone around you that cares enough about you to tell you, how lucky you are.
And I think to really just drill down on it a little bit, if there is the opportunity, if you're in that sort of format or the ability to sort of ask more probing questions around it. So can you say more about that? What do you mean by that? And just really repeating back what they're saying to you, so that maybe they can make their own self-adjustment. They're like, oh, sorry, that's not exactly how that was coming across. Sorry about that. And then, clarify, right? Because I really believe that most people are well-intended. And it's just something that's behind them, whether it's an insecurity or something that's really sort of driving that behavior that, as you mentioned, people probably really aren't aware that they're doing it. So
part of the courage, connected to courage, is compassion, because you often find that people often are in a situation that something that is surrounding them is causing them to behave that way.
Yeah.
And, they may not even be aware of it themselves. And because you're there to have a conversation with them, it's not trying to fix them. It's trying to give them some insight around what their behavior is and the consequences of that action to others, including themselves. That sense of care can take you to a place that really help them find a way out to a different spot.
Yeah.
And so, maybe it's as hard and as simple as that, huh? So that's maybe the message we're leaving for our audience.
Yeah, that's very good.
Care.
Okay, thanks, Lorne.
Hey,